And a top focus on world DNA. The United States and the United Kingdom launched strikes against 36 targets in Yemen with the support of several other countries. And this was in response to repeated attacks on shipping by Iran-backed Houthis that have disrupted global trade and put lives at risk for weeks now. The strikes comes a day after US's operations against Iran-linked groups in Iraq and Syria, in which they targeted 85 locations. The Pentagon said that the strikes hit weapons storage facilities, missile systems, launchers and other capabilities that the Houthis have used to attack Red Sea shipping. It added that it targeted 13 locations across the country. Meanwhile, the UK government said that it engaged in a third wave of proportionate and targeted strikes against Iran-linked Houthi militants in Yemen. Footage released by the British Defence Ministry shows aircraft taking off from an airfield identified as Akrotiri, Cyprus, by the ministry. The Yemen strikes are running parallel to an unfolding U.S. campaign of military retaliation over the killing of 3 American soldiers in a drone strike by Iran-backed militants on an outpost in Jordan. On Friday, the U.S. carried out the first wave of that retaliation, striking in Iraq and Syria against more than 85 targets linked to Iran's Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps and militias that it backs. The strikes reportedly killed nearly 40 people. The U.S. military's Central Command said that the strikes targeted missile sites, drone storage and operation sites, radars and also helicopters. Iraq had summoned a U.S. envoy in Baghdad after the strikes. Iran has also condemned the strikes. It was as of now unclear how Tehran will respond to the strikes, which do not directly target Iran but degrade groups that it backs. These strikes, it has now fueled fears that the war could spread to other regions in West Asia. However, UK Defence Minister Grant Shapps has denied that possibility. He says that it is not an escalation. And for more on the latest strikes, the second round of strikes by the US, we're now being joined by Edward P. Joseph, Senior Fellow at the Johns Hopkins University School of Advanced International Studies and Foreign Policy Analyst. And he's joining us live from Washington, D.C. Thanks very much for taking our time and joining us here on Beyond, sir.
Good to be with you, Raisha.
Right. Now, the next round of retaliatory strikes for the attack in Jordan has begun. We've just witnessed the US and UK struck at least 30 Houthi targets in Yemen. Now, all this comes after US struck Iran-backed militias in Iraq and Syria. All this while US says that it does not want to escalate tensions in the region. How do you read these strikes affecting the already volatile West Asia?
Raisha, first of all, the U.S. and UK have tried to make it clear that these strikes in Yemen are not retaliatory for the attack in Jordan that killed 3 U.S. service members, so that these are separate. These are part of the ongoing effort. There were already 2 separate efforts by the U.S. and British forces in January, hitting Yemeni targets that are supported by Iran, both in terms of supply and in the presence of leadership of senior Iranian commanders on the ground in Yemen. And this represents the third effort, as described correctly in your report, by the U.S. and the British to inflict some damage and to degrade the Houthi capability to disrupt shipping in the Red Sea. And we should point out here that even though, of course, the Houthis retain a lot of mobility, it's relatively easy to move drones around and continue to have these types of attacks, that Iran's sponsorship is not achieving anything geopolitically. There is no additional pressure on Israel. To the contrary, we have a half-dozen countries supported the U.S. and British in this latest effort in Yemen, and that included Bahrain which could not have acted without the support of Saudi Arabia. Please.
Right, Mr. Joseph, you speak of how this is the third effort by the US and UK to deter Houthi attacks in the Red Sea, and US says that the latest strike sends a clear message to the Houthis that they will continue to bear further consequences. However, we have seen that the previous strikes did not deter Houthis from attacking commercial vessels in the Red Sea. Rather, they have vowed what they call their actions against UK and US aggressors will only increase. In your opinion, do you think that the latest strike will dissuade Houthis from attacking commercial vessels in the Red Sea?
Well, we know that the Houthis retain the capability to move around in small units. Again, they have active support from Iran, which ships not only the weaponry and the guided missiles, but the computer components that are necessary for the guidance systems. And it's very difficult to interdict that. There are reports even that Iran sends some of this stuff over land through other ports besides Yemeni ports. So it's very difficult. The Houthis retain this ability, but what they risk is their military capabilities in a country in which they do not have complete control and which they retain a strong opposition within Yemen. So at some point, the Houthis and their Iranian backers have to consider the effect on the military balance within Yemen itself. And again, the other thing is, what does Iran and the Houthis achieve by this? There is no additional pressure on Israel to halt. Instead, there are negotiations in Paris for a ceasefire. The Israelis have long put forward an agreement to a plan for hostage release in exchange for an extended ceasefire. And they continue with Egyptian and Qatari help there in Paris. Again, no additional pressure, nothing geopolitical here benefiting Iran, except greater exposure as a destabilizing agent in the Middle East. Please.
Right, Mr. Joseph, my last question to you, and coming back to US's retaliatory strikes. Now, seeking to avoid a regional war, which US has clearly outlined, the US has not targeted Iran directly. What is the broader message that US is trying to send here?
The message is very clear that the U.S. is determined to protect its troops that are deployed in the Middle East, as we say, or as you say, West Asia, that are there primarily for protection against the Islamic State. And the Islamic State, of course, is the very organization that committed a terrorist attack in Iran, killing nearly 100 Iranian civilians earlier last month. So that is the primary reason the U.S. remains undeterred by these attacks. And the message is that there will be a price if these Iranian proxies continue to attack U.S. forces. Of course, the Biden administration has no interest in, at this point, directly targeting Iran. And it seems that Iran understands that. And we should point out one final thing here. Iran's major objective is to keep the United States out of the Middle East or West Asia, as you say. And in fact, the Hamas mass terrorist attacks of October 7th have produced the opposite, as have Iranian actions. We now have 2 U.S. aircraft carriers that are deployed in the Mediterranean. We have this increased naval activity, British and American, in the Red Sea. And we have the European Union. The European Union itself has deployed its own independent mission in the Red Sea. So it's exactly the opposite of what Iran had hoped. Instead of diminished Western military presence in this region, there is increased military presence of the West in the Red Sea in particular, and nothing geopolitically that is benefiting Iran. Please.
Right, Mr. Joseph. Thanks very much for taking our time and joining us here on WION. Always a pleasure to have you here.
You're welcome.